Hi there, it's Richard Little from your land partner coming to you today from the actual office. So no virtual background, etc. Nice wall behind me. Nobody in the room, so it's a general office, so it's not where I normally sit, but thought I'd take this opportunity. So anyway, today is video 58 out of the 100 days of content that we are currently near 58% through, I guess, or 57% through, 58% in a few minutes' time. So we're in the midst of a mini section on planning, around about 12 videos on planning, and today I want to talk to you about action that you can take during the application, during the process of the application. So the application's gone in. Yeah, you've prepared, everything's gone in as you want it, etc., etc. So, do you just sit and wait, or do you not? What actually happens? Well, most of you will know from what I said previous video is that once it's validated, once the application is validated, so everything is correct from the planning authority's point of view, from the administration side of things anyway, there will be a notification sent out, publication of the planning application, and then 21 days generally public consultation period. Then after that, the planning officer will bring all the stuff together, compile a report. Then it will depend on whether the planning department are making a decision based on what we call delegated powers. Now that can happen if it's not a major application, or even some major applications, to be fair, if there isn't too much third-party comment, should we say, from the public consultation and other consultees like Highway Authority, local interest groups, Historic England, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of consultees during this the planning process that get asked for various things. So depending on what comes back from them, it could be decided on delegated powers, which is obviously decided within the department, and you get your notice sent out of either approval or refusal. Now, the alternative to that is, which we generally find ourselves on, because they're either what we would call probably major applications, or they're contentious in some way, or there's a lot of public comment, and there's been a bit of persuasion, shall we say, to get it to go to committee. So it does depend. So let's just make an assumption, because as it's going through the process, you won't know whether it's going to committee. So we always plan for it to go to committee. So one thing, once you've got your designated planning officer, and it generally happens, unless there's a personnel change, which also happens, but they'll tell you who your planning officer is, and then what is a good thing to do is have a look on the planning portal for some previous applications that have gone through, some reports that have been written potentially by that planning officer. Starts giving you a flavour from where they come from. So it may well be that you might pick up on something there. You think, oh, actually, they seem to be really, really focused on landscape, for instance. Have we got enough in there on landscape? So review your landscape report, because it's not too late during the process that you can add information. Yeah, it's not a done deal. You can add supporting information, and you'll do that for two reasons. A, you think you've missed something off, or B, you start seeing public comments come through on the portal, because obviously planning application gets a number, and then you can follow it, etc. And in many authorities, you can set up notifications so that you don't even have to keep searching. It will come to you when stuff is added. So quite a few do that, which is quite useful. That helps you follow other applications as well, which is also something you should be doing, is also keeping an eye out of what else is coming up, that's maybe already in the system, that's already there, that you might not have seen. It might be something close to where you're going, it might be relevant, it might be a competing site, or something that comes on after you all the way through this 8, 13, 20 week, whatever process it ends up being. So as the public get to respond, and some of the other reports might come in from other consultees, say like Highways and Historic England and people like that. Now you may well get an opportunity to review. If it's something that's quite damning and you think it's going to affect it, you might take a decision to withdraw your application and add information if what you are going to add is to be significant, because the planning officer is not going to allow you to add loads and loads of stuff, because if they do, you'll have to go back out to public consultation. So the advice generally then is that you withdraw it and resubmit with all that information. And that's sometimes, I can't remember the last time we did it, but sometimes it's the right thing to do. So as I say, you're keeping an eye on your own application, and if you can, submit some information. So what you want to try and do is as soon as you know what that the designated planning officer is, throw them an email. Don't expect a response. If you get a response, that's probably quite good. But just to say that you're there, to any assistance they want, any clarification or anything, any additional information, any additional drawings that they may want, please get in touch. Yeah. So and then what you want to do is, once you know the public consultation period is probably 2 weeks in, another week to go, 2 weeks sometimes to go, is reach out to them again, particularly if you've seen any remarks anywhere. And just sort of, just say that you've read it. Again, you're not trying to drain their time. Actually you've read it and you might have a comment or two to make. Would it be appropriate if we responded to that? And if you can get a dialogue with a planning officer, then that might benefit, but don't expect to. They're busy people. So, they might not be busy in the same way that you and I consider we're busy, but they are busy people from where they sit. Yeah. So try and get a little bit of sort of something going backwards and forwards, and don't be afraid through this process to sort of, if you think something's not right, then point that out. So if you think that there is potentially a campaign, an organised campaign, you might get to hear about it, about people that are nothing to do with the area, nothing to do with the project, but they're bringing in people because they know people that are going to come in and start and being disruptive to your application and pointing out things that aren't relevant, and all of a sudden they've got a petition that's got 500 names on it and stuff like that. You just want to sort of, the planning officers are used to that sort of stuff, so just point out, you don't have to be the planning officer's friend, but this isn't the right time to start battling with them, but it's reaching out, see if you can get a bit of dialogue going if there is a benefit to it. Equally, if they don't, say, just put your points forward, but don't always expect an answer, and don't get upset if you don't get an answer. So also, while this is going on, what we were doing is to say we're always planning to go to committee. So we will have the committee profiled. We'll generally have done this previously, to be fair, but for those of you that haven't done it before, we will be looking at every member that is entitled to sit on the planning committee. So any of those members that might be there, they are allowed substitutes, etc., but that just go with the members that are actually on the planning committee. So they're actually allowed to sit on the planning committee. We're really interested in the chair and perhaps the vice or deputy chair, because the chair generally carries a lot of weight. The vice, less so in our experience, but they're often the doers, the people that effectively they're lobbying everybody and different things and making sure people are doing what they need to do. But what you want to do is see, find out who they are, what their political party is, look at their voting records, so look at previous. This stuff is available. It's not going to be easy to find, so don't ask me for, where do I go to get it? You're going to have to dig around. Some planning authorities now, the committee meetings are recorded. Really worth, sort of playing a few of those and getting to know who the names are and how it sort of works. Because what you always got to remember is, all the way through the planning application, pre-planning, etc., we've got professionals working. We've invested a lot of money in consultants and reports and things like that, designers and and everything. And when it comes to committee, and let's assume it comes to committee, it's a bunch of very well-meaning amateurs that actually are going to make the decision. So it's really, really important for you to understand who they are and who the leaders are. And there are only generally in any committee of anything between 8 and 16 people normally, there's 3 or 4 true leaders amongst them. Then there's a few that just make a lot of noise just because they like to be seen to be making noise. And then there's the quiet ones who are the followers. But don't ignore any of them. But what you really are looking for is to identify the leaders. You'll see from their voting records what they actually, what their political bias might be, without assuming from their, the colour of their flag or whatever, their label as such. Don't always assume from that, but you'll start seeing what's really important to them, and you'll find that some of the stuff is quite petty in the respect of what we would see. They'll start talking about things that may not even have any planning significance, and it's the duty of your designated planning officer to put the case to the committee. Yeah, we will delve into even more detail in when we come to the 2 or 3 videos time, when we actually come and talk specifically about committees and how they run, etc. But at this point during the plan application, as I say, profile, that might sound a bit too much for some people, but it's really, really worth it, because it will come down to that it's having the edge. It's all about understanding who you're going to be putting your case to. Yeah, so this is stuff that you can be doing while the application is going through, and we got lots of stories about people put their application in, they get it validated, they get a notice to come out, and it sort of says that in 8 weeks you're going to get a decision and all that, and it doesn't happen, and it goes on for a year, and they ignore them and all that sort of stuff. You really can't let that happen. Okay, you've got to be working behind the scenes, but we'll talk about that in much more detail when that decision, from the decision point of view, goes for. Once we get a decision notice, we'll talk about that. So failure to get a decision notice, we're going to cover in that aspect as well. But during this process, don't just sit back and wait. So if you've got a planning consultant or whoever's dealing with you, what we would call an agent, the agent that's actually dealing with the application for you, so they're filled in all the stuff that's going backwards and forwards when there is emails, etc., and phone calls, is don't just leave it to them. Make sure you you check in with them at least once a week. Most of you will know by now that we manage that situation very, very tightly. We value all the consultants in the world, but we will not let them manage it. And we might let them manage part of it, but we will still be managing the managing. So make sure that those of you that are less experienced than ourselves, make sure that who you're working with is a team player and they are keeping you notified. And don't worry about hassling them either, because you would have already told them that actually, we want to make sure this is the crucial part of the process. We want to make sure that you're up to date in what's going on. It's not good enough just for a phone call or an email from them to come back and say, oh well, we haven't heard anything yet, but don't worry about it. That actually isn't good enough. Love to debate this subject when we talk about planning consultants and people that planning applications in. What happens is they just become so used to the process and very experienced in it, they sometimes miss that little edge that you need to actually push it. Because for us, we will treat that application as that's the only one we've got, because sometimes it's the only one we're working on. To the consultants, who can be fantastic consultants in many ways, but they just miss that little cutting edge, that little bit of actually, do you realise what this means to us, in so much as it's the only project we've got going on. So a bit more involvement, but say in terms of getting the right consultants on board, that's a whole other video. I'm not even sure we're covering that in this series, but maybe we'll find somewhere to do it at the end, because that's so important how you instruct consultants and how you then manage those consultants. And we're quite privileged that we've got some good consultants around us. Some are sort of fairly they're thereabouts all the time. Others come and go, because we don't all need people all the time, and the key is 2 things: engaging them and manage them to get the best out of them. Anyway, as ever, I've sort of gone off piste a little bit. So back to what we're talking about is what action you can take whilst the planning application process is going through, because it is a very, very frustrating time, and particularly if you're not going to get a decision when you're expecting it. So again, if you get something that comes back, and we'll cover this in decisions as well. No, we won't. Forget that. I'll cover it now. if a planning department come back to you and say they'd like to extend it, extend the time, because if they get your permission to extend the time by 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or whatever, and they always have a good reason, they're waiting for consultee staff or whatever else, or the real reason is that they perhaps didn't start the work early enough and they're leaving it to the back end. That might be slightly unfair, but from experience, that's generally what the reason is. Leave it till the last minute. So it's not just you that do it. It's lots of people do that. And so now there may be a benefit to you saying yes, and instinctively people say, oh yeah, that's okay, because I don't want to upset them. But actually sometimes that is really the wrong thing to do, because sometimes those extensions go beyond, and then there's another extension, and you just end up being kicked down the road because they know that you are going to accept an extension. So all of a sudden it goes, oh, I can't do that one this week. Oh, we'll just ask them for another extension. They'll be fine. So sometimes you have to say, sorry, you might permit one extension maybe. Generally, we probably prefer not to do that. What we would say is, if we got an email to say that, is to say, well, actually, we might consider it, but what we would do is like to talk it through with you. So we actually want a phone call with them, or in the good old days, a meeting, because we want to actually get to the real reason why they're actually kicking it down. Is there an actual problem that we can actually help them with? So don't accept just oh yeah, okay, we'll extend it because it's the planning officer, and we need to do that. And that's something else that we've caught a few consultants out on as well, whereas they say, oh yeah, we better give them a bit more time, and there's no real reason, because sometimes the consultants don't want to push the planning officers because they might be dealing with them again on another project, and etc. So you get my drift. So don't always agree to an extension. So I think that's probably covered most of the stuff that you can do, most of the action you can take. I mean, there may well be specific projects that people have got when we're doing all sorts of other things, and obviously we're doing stuff outside of the planning process. We're talking to funders. You might be looking for investors. We're talking to contractors. We're talking to all sorts of things. But that's not what we're talking about today in this video. We're just talking about the action in reference to, in respect of planning stuff. So I think that's pretty much covered the few points I've got written down here anyway. So it's been Richard Little from your land partner. I hope that was helpful for those of you watching live, and those of you, the majority of you that don't watch live, which is fair enough because you never know when we're coming up. So that's not a problem. So take care, and we will see you again another day. Take care.